my friends. It's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And have you ever taken a win, either personally or as a fan of a team that you support, somebody that you were rooting for, where it feels socially like you're not supposed to be happy about the win, but it never even occurred to you to not be happy about the win because it's a win and it was awesome? Maybe you were a higher seed playing against a lower seed, or rooting for a team that was a higher seed playing against a lower seed. Or maybe somebody on the team was sick that day, or there's some built-in excuse or some goofy call that the officials made or whatever. And as much as you try to muster the ability to acknowledge the controversy or to mope and be like, yeah, I'm not that happy that we won that one, you still just can't. You're like, yeah, no, actually, I'm just jubilant that we won. And maybe there's controversy or whatever, but I'm just thrilled with the outcome and I'm super happy. And, you know, in competition, stuff happens sometimes and I'm just going with it. I think that's the kind of situation we're looking at here at the end of Esther chapter 8. As a modern audience member, we're going to go back and we're going to look at this thing and we're going to think of it in very modern terms and very not Iron Age terms. And we're going to apply a certain understandable set of moral questions to this, run it through those lenses, and it might feel weird. And there are things about Esther that feel really human and really familiar and really relatable. And there are some other things that clang a little bit and feel a little bit weird, like this edict to overcome an edict that we've been talking about for several days. But I think it's interesting to go and look at what the text says about how the Jews and even the whole citadel of Susa responded to this edict when it actually went down. There was no moral ambiguity about this for them. There was no apologizing for the win because Haman got boxed out and lost and Mordecai and Esther won. There was no hanging their heads and being like, well, you know, I understand there's controversy and they're good people on all sides of this debate. No, there's none of that. It's just jubilation at the fact that somehow this seemingly inescapable, impossible, violent, horrible situation that is going to result in the end of the Jewish people gets flipped on its head, and instead of the people who were just bystanders about to get killed getting killed, they are going to have the opportunity to defend themselves, and they are clearly expected to win the day. No. There's no apologizing in Esther 8 for this W. There's just celebration. So the king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy and kill and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. Which, whether that ultimately were to happen or not, would certainly serve as a gigantic deterrent. I don't remember who said it, but somebody in one of the conversations we've been having around the internet about this part of the book of Esther was like, well, I mean, however it plays out, it's a great deterrent, right? I mean, coming off of the first edict, there's really no downside. Just make a big gang and go gang up on your local Jews, and then you're going to win and you're going to get their stuff. The only problem you're going to have is how you divide it up amongst those of you who went on this murderous rampage. Well, now all of a sudden, something's at stake. Not only is your life in play if you decide to attack the Jews, but they've been authorized to retaliate violently across the board. And so you're jeopardizing other people by doing this. Now, there are stakes for the attacker. I thought that was an interesting perspective. Thank you to whoever said that. Sorry, I didn't remember your name. I apologize. The edict continues, Esther 8:12. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, which reminds me of something else somebody said in one of the conversations we've been having around the internet about this chapter and verse here over the last week or so. Somebody just weighed in, I think it was on Patreon, and they're like, just do a calendar reform that year and cancel the month of Adar. Just extend whatever month is before that or whatever month is after, so that this day never actually occurs and this thing can't be carried out. If your goal as Mordecai and Esther was simply to avoid this and kick this trouble down the road further, knowing that there were people who were eagerly sharpening their knives to kill you and everyone from your people group, if your goal was just to avoid this and ratchet it down and have a ceasefire, then this would be a great way to do it. I love the calendar reform idea that eliminates the appointed day altogether for that year. But as we've dived deep into this, it's very clear that it is presented as a good thing that Mordecai and Esther are seizing this one unique moment where they have the upper hand and the ability to defend themselves, to out their bloodthirsty enemies and defeat them and outmaneuver them. And it looks like that is indeed what they are doing. Verse 13, a copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Verse 14, the couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Okay, remember when the first edict was issued in the citadel of Susa? And remember the very last thing that we get here at the end of chapter 3, that's the chapter where Haman's edict goes out. It said, spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. I mean, it's almost the exact same language, right? The couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command. I really like that language, as though the king has the ability to jab those jingling spurs into the ribs of those Persian Pony Express rider horses from a distance by proxy. And so spurred on by the king's command, the couriers are going out. And remember, at the end of chapter 3, the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. But then here in 8:14, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Well, how are they going to feel about it? Next verse. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold and a purple robe of fine linen, and the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. And there we have it again, my friends. It's just one more thing that gets done the wrong way earlier in the book that gets flipped around, and now it's done the right way. Susa's baffled by this. Think about it. It's 100 years of having Jews as your neighbors. And remember what the command was through the prophet Jeremiah to all the people who are about to go into exile. I have plans to prosper you and not to harm you, but go and work for the benefit of the city. Plant gardens, make businesses, do stuff, make it better while you're there. The Jews endeared themselves to their neighbors in the citadel of Susa and in the other big cities of the empire. The people who were just getting to know the Jews clearly liked them. It was good for everybody to have the Jews around. They were good neighbors, even if they were a little different religiously. That's okay. Persia could handle that. But it's the age-old enemies who predate Persia and predate Babylon and predate Assyria and predate the Philistines and go all the way back to the super ancient Bronze Age stuff. Those are the people, or the descendants of those people, are the ones who have been looking to settle this score. Everybody else, look at this. They're excited. Ticker tape parade. This is awesome. And look how Mordecai's dressed up. He's getting, for a second time, the treatment that Haman so badly coveted, to be mistaken for the king, dressed up to look like the king, wearing that purple robe. It says he's wearing royal garments of blue and white. I have no idea. I mean, I'm just in real time talking with you here, so I might be making an even bigger idiot out of myself than normal, but I don't know why the colors of Israel are blue and white, but I can't help but make the mental connection as I visualize what Mordecai was dressed like, and as I picture the modern Israeli flag. Maybe there's absolutely no connection there whatsoever, but what I do know is these kind of bright colors like blue and purple, the colors associated with royalty, they were expensive. Now you and I can go to Walmart and for $7 we can buy any shirt in any color. We don't associate a given color with wealth because that color is just expensive to make. But blue, and especially purple, which had to be wrung out of these specific types of little shellfish that only live in certain parts of the world. These were very, very expensive colors to make and to dye clothing. And that's why they were associated with wealth and especially with royalty. And so Mordecai is decked out in all of that kind of garb, and Susa absolutely loves it. There is no moral ambiguity. Notice it's not saying here that the Jews celebrated a whole bunch. I mean, it's going to say that in a minute. We're going to get to that. But it's a secular celebration. It's a diverse celebration. It's a multicultural celebration, as all of the people who aren't Jews in Susa are like, this is great. The Jews aren't going to get killed. And it also gives you a little bit of a hint that maybe the attitude amongst the people in the know, the citizenry, was that the Jews aren't the ones who are the pain in the butt, the troublesome people group who causes all the problems and disrupts things for the king, like Haman was suggesting. It seems like they recognized that Haman was using the oldest trick in the book, which is projection. Accuse other people of what you are. Remember, Haman accused the Jews of being a troublesome people. Their customs are different, says Haman about the Jews, than those of all the other people. They don't obey the king's laws. It's not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. So he's saying they're disruptive. Just having them around is a problem. They're going to sow chaos just by being here. But who is it that's actually sowing chaos? It's not the Jews. It's the Agagites. It's Haman. He's the only one who set in motion this whole gigantic state-sponsored civil war. It's the Agagites. It's Haman who threw the whole thing into chaos. And just because he was the first one to make the accusation doesn't make the accusation right. He is clearly projecting, and popular opinion, based on what we learn here about how Susa is responding, confirms that the populace doesn't agree with Haman. They think Haman's the issue and his ilk are the issue. They think the Jews, who again apparently did what they were told to do through the prophet Jeremiah, they think the Jews are good neighbors and the Jews are people they would want to keep around. And so everybody's happy, everybody's celebrating. And next time around, we'll look specifically at what the reaction to this news was like amongst the Jewish community there in Susa and around the empire. Hey, I'm super excited to roll right from this part of the story into the very next thing that happens in the Bible, which is in the book of Nehemiah. I'm already putting in the work and getting things set up so that we can transition right into that when Esther is done. If Esther is technically season 3 of this podcast, Nehemiah is going to be 4, but we're going to get a whole new batch of themes. We're going to get new characters, and the story is going to take us in a very new direction, even thematically. And so, yes, we're going to be in the same era, and Nehemiah is going to take our brains to an entirely new place. I am printing up the little books that we do for each season, each book of the Bible, every time we do this. And everybody who's supporting at any level, anywhere, when I get ready to send those out, is going to get one of those books. At this point, we've never offered those again for sale or anything like that. This is kind of the one opportunity that I take to send those out as a way of really specially saying thank you to everybody who supports the program. And I have another thing. I'm still not quite ready to announce it, but it's really cool, and it's a whole new thing that we're going to be doing every time we roll over into a new book or a new season as well. I'm so close to being able to tell you about that. That'll be a blast. All right, more on how the Jews responded to all of this news next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.